Hello and welcome back to Mark's NOTCAST, or if this is your first viewing, welcome. It is October the 30th, 2025. This is about number 464, I think. And it's been about a week since the last one. I can't believe I've been doing these for 5 years, in which you've seen me become old and haggard, or, well, more correctly, older and haggarder by doing so. But really, bald blokes, we all look the same, don't we? And bald blokes with beards and glasses, there's lots of us about. I am pretty much my own demographic at this point. In the time since you last saw me, I went to 3 gigs in one day, actually. I went to see Collapse Lung and Censor at the garage. And knowing the time that Collapse Lung were finishing, I then went over to the Forum, formerly known as the Town and Country, in that there London, to go and see the Wedding Present play their 40th anniversary show there. Yes, I've seen the Wedding Present a lot. Actually, by the last time I looked, 34 times. But they changed their sets a lot. And that's a really very good thing indeed, unlike certain bands that play the same set for 110 shows in a row. Who could I be thinking about there? Well, also, I've been a bit under the weather. So on Monday, I had the flu jab and I had the pneumonia jab as well, which means that on Tuesday and Wednesday, I had both flu and pneumonia. Now, pneumonia almost killed me in 2014. And I can be very flippant about that now, but my God, at the time, it was probably the illest, the sickest I've been. I remember I rang my best friend at the time, and they said they didn't recognise my voice. Because I didn't. So I said, prove to me that you're you. And I said something that only I would know about them and vice versa. And they were like, it really doesn't sound like you. Well, it really didn't sound like me. So I'm quite glad to have a pneumonia jab. It's a once in a lifetime thing. But what it does mean is that I have been having several hour naps in the evenings for the past few days, feeling absolutely awful, even worse than the Metallica and Lou Reed joint album Lulu, and my God, that is bad, isn't it? Obviously, as also Minor mentioned, I was on tour the week before, so I saw Hope of the States, John Grant, and I went to, deep breath now people, Bristol, London, Manchester, Edinburgh. Wow. I think I might have to slow down at some point. Certainly that's the vibe I'm getting. And there was a very important anniversary as well. The 30th anniversary of the death of my mum. And I miss her. With that over, today on to Mark talking about not personal things. So about every Halloween-ish, I do some kind of vaguely horror-themed episode. So I've done like the films of John Carpenter, the Omen films, for example. This time round, I am doing the filmed adaptations of Stephen King. So I'm talking through, my top 20 Stephen King adaptations. And I've chosen 20 because there are approximately 147 filmed Stephen King adaptations. There's 65 books. There's over 200 short stories. And almost all of them have been turned into some form of visual entertainment. Now, I do have some rules about it. The first one is no TV adaptations unless they have been shown in a theatrical form at the cinema. The second one is I have been fairly strict about what I've included. For me, it's the things that only Stephen King could write that I'm really, really interested in, not the things that anybody could write. So before we get much, much further into it, there are 4 big, scary elephants in the room which are not in my list. And I'm going to explain why before we get into the top 20. So the 4 big elephants are Gerald's Game, which is a fantastic film, by the way, but it has none of the elements that I would classify as being exclusively unique to Stephen King. Stand By Me, which is a great book and a very good film, but it is not something that when I watch it, it could be a very sincere John Hughes, for example. So again, not in the list. Green Mile, which I have seen and I don't like. And I don't like Green Mile because it is sappy, sentimental, cloying, and overly sincere. So it doesn't have any, it's too straight. And it's one of those films, like Titanic, that seems to be designed to make you cry. Except I, being British, have no feelings, no emotions, and therefore feel nothing when I watch it. Or more correctly, actually, I mean, it's a good film, but it's not, to me, it's not a Stephen King film. It's a film that Stephen King wrote the story for. And there's a distinction between the two. And then the last one, and the big elephant in the room, Shawshank Redemption. I don't like it. It is trite and grossly overrated shit. I mean, if you love it, great, fantastic. Really glad you enjoy it. For me, I watched it and I was going, I don't understand it. It's like Forrest Gump in a prison. And that sounds bitchy, but you know, that's who I am. And with that, then I'm going to go into the top 20 Stephen King adaptations. And these are filmed, not television, which means the stand isn't on here, no matter which version of the stand it is. It also means that given the number of films that there have been, not as many as the Amityville Horror, but given the number of films that there have been, there are going to be some clunkers towards the bottom. Nothing as bad as the Langoliers, thank God. Nothing as bad as Silver Bullet, which I did watch through my process of watching all of the films, and oh boy, that's good. Nothing as bad as Lawnmower Man, which I understand Stephen King actually took them to court to prevent having his name attached to it. And bearing in mind how much stuff Stephen King has written, he's basically the Philip K. Dick of horror. Now, Philip K. Dick, if you don't know, wrote a lot of books. I think in 1964 he wrote 8 books, and I think apparently was tripping balls for a lot of that period of time. I have read a lot of Philip K. Dick books. I have read what he regards to be his worst book, Vulcan's Hammer, and I can confirm it is atrocious. And there are some of the Stephen King books that you kind of go, right, so you're on your 3rd novel a year. They're not great, are they? Some of them brilliant, some of them not so great. So we're going to start at number 20, which again is not great, but it has some really, really good moments in it. It is Sleepwalkers from 1992. Sleepwalkers is the only, or at least was the first Stephen King property, I hate to use that word property, which was solely written for the screen and not based upon a pre-existing novel or text. And it's got some very, very interesting moments in it. It doesn't land the execution. It doesn't stick the landing particularly well. And the cast is wasted in this. Ron Perlman is in it. Mark Hamill is in it. Okay, Stephen King's in it, doing one of his cameos. He's not always great. Alice Krieg is in it, I believe, who is also, by the way, the Bald Queen. And it's got some great moments in it. It's got some really interesting stuff, some really interesting ideas. It has got one of my favourite lines of dialogue in any film ever. The cat saved my life. And it's also got some fabulous kind of subtext around it, where there's actually an army of cats that protect humans from energy-sucking vampires. And I love the idea of cats, or dogs for that matter, but mostly cats, being a league that's sent to protect humans from the forces of evil. That's how I feel about my cats. If you have cats, that's probably how you feel about your cats too. So it's got some very good ideas, but it doesn't quite stick the landing. So that's Sleepwalkers. That's number 20. That's not amazing. At number 19, we have Children of the Corn. And Children of the Corn is certainly not the best Stephen King movie. It's not even the best Stephen King movie of 1984. It has some interesting ideas in it. And it follows actually a pattern that we will see in some of the Richard Bachman books, in Carrie, The Long Walk, The Running Man, for example, Roadwork, which is, as far as I know, just a text thing, which is about a realistic portrayal of children and adolescents that have no agency, that are seeking their form of influence and control over the reality that they live in. You'll also see this in Christine, but I'm blowing my trumpet for later on in the episode. Children of the Corn is quite good. It has some moments in it. I think Linda Hamilton is by certainly the best piece of acting in the whole darn thing. And does her best with what is, to be honest, sometimes a fairly slim script. But it does have some interesting ideas in it. I mean, to me, it has that air of foreboding, that air of tension, that air of Something Wicked This Way Comes that will actually is hugely kind of reminiscent of the best of John Carpenter. So The Fog, Prince of Darkness, for example, that type of stuff. So it's a good film, not a great film. Now, by the time we get to about number 12, 13, we are really cooking on gas here, but we're still down at number 18. And we have number 18, Cujo, Man Bites Dog, effectively, in which a big, scary, fluffy Saint Bernard somehow gets infected with some terrible, terrible thing and goes on a huge kind of killing spree. It's got some unusual subplots about alcoholism. Well, sensing a trend there with Stephen King. And around family relationships, but it is effectively, and actually very, very similar to The Mist, it is effectively a trial run for what they call a bottle episode. So a bottle episode on television is where you put a number of people in a set and confined location and give them a problem to solve. One of the best episodes of Breaking Bad, which is also one of the worst episodes, depending on your point of view, is Rian Johnson's The Fly, the one where Walter White is trapped alone in his lab with a fly that could potentially destroy all those lovely drugs he's making. And so therefore, Cujo does roughly the same thing. It is two people trapped inside a car, terrorized by a vengeful force of nature who happens to be a dog. It's got some very curious kind of filmmaking ideas in it. What it reminds me of, actually, and this is an obscure one, and I think it's James Brolin stars in it, 1977's The Car, which is again kind of like half rip-off of Jaws, half rip-off of Jill. But The Car, in order to pad out its meagre running time, has a lot of stuff that you never normally see in a film. Scenes where people do things and you go, I've never seen that on film, because it's not regarded to be interesting enough to be in a film. Cujo has moments like that are really kind of interesting indeed. If you are a DVD Blu-ray nerd, hello, it's me. There is a 2-disc version here, which you can get from CX for a mere £28 these days. Good God, where do they get the price from? But it does have just a Q&A with Dee Wallace from the Cinemaniacs and Monster Fest, which is 96 minutes, and an interview with Kim Newman, who I think is quite interesting from a criticism point of view. So the next one we've got, and this is going to be 16 and 17, because there's 2 films and there's 1 film at the same time. It is going to be the Creepshow movies, directed by, in both respects, this one's directed by George A. Romero, and this one is directed by Michael Gornick, whoever that is. And it has some really interesting moments in Creepshow 1 and Creepshow 2. Creepshow 2 is most definitely the lesser of the two, although it does have a kind of an interesting, scary story called The Raft, which again follows on from the bottle episode that I mentioned earlier about people trapped on a raft on a lake, being terrorized by an object that lives under the water. And yeah, it's got some good moments in it. It's got some not so good moments in it. It also has, of course, the evil, vicious bastards getting their comeuppance from a supernatural force in it, which is quite handy. Creepshow number 1 is better by a substantial margin, and Creepshow number 1 I remember watching when I was about that tall and about 12 years old when it was on television. So one of the things that revolutionised me and my life when I was younger was the advent of both being able to set the timer on the VHS and the VHS itself. And so you could record horror movies that were on at 1, 2 in the morning, watch them the next day before mum and dad got back from school. And if my dad's watching that, yes, you know damn well that's what I was doing, because you were taping the same movies as me sometimes. So, for example, Creepshow, we recorded off, I think, ITV, and it's a horror anthology in 4 parts with 4 stories, primarily being Father's Day, which is about a difficult mother and that kind of thing, and it's just about dysfunctional family and an oppressed kind of mother-father relationship. The Lonesome Death of Geordie Verrill, which has Stephen King starring as a dipshit hobo from Bumblefuck somewhere that touches a weird space meteorite and turns into a plant. Okay, I'm not selling it. It's not great. It's the worst part about it, but at least he gave it a damn good shot. Something to Tide You Over, which is a very interesting tale of revenge with Leslie Nielsen before he really kind of leaned fully into his comedy chops, and The Crate, of course, which is and finally They're Creeping Up on You, which is a half-hour story about effectively some kind of Howard Hughes type character who is obsessed with cleanliness. I like Creepshow. Is it great? No. Is it the best King anthology? Absolutely not. But it has some good moments in it. Where we get to number 15, though, because remember Creepshow 1 and 2 are 16 and 17, when we get to number 15 is we get to what is called by Kinder Trauma as one of the last truly great gothic vampire films. I don't really think that, but Salem's Lot is number 15. And I, James Mason, play one of the bad guys in Salem's Lot. And it's an epic. It's 3 hours, originally broadcast on American television over 2 nights, released in a truncated form in some European cinemas. This version here on this Blu-ray is, and I will just check quickly, the full kind of widescreen theatrical television version, but with all the theatrical violence and blood and guts stuffed into it. And it's got some interesting ideas in it, very heavily influential to me on John Carpenter's vampires. It has some great ideas about, for example, not fitting into the culture that you're living in, being part of a world which has moved on while you've remained exactly the same. Some interesting ideas around the notions of otherness, because horror has a lot of stuff around the notion of the other and not being accepted, and sometimes that is completely innocent and sometimes it most definitely isn't. The execution isn't perhaps as sharp as I would like, and I think it's been sanitized a little bit by television, but it really has an opportunity to breathe. And it's directed by Tobe Hooper, who did Poltergeist, irrespective of your opinions about it, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Life Force, some really great films from him, and Salem's Lot is again one of his. Number 14, and this is where we start to get into the really good shit now. It is 1984's Firestarter with Drew Barrymore, not only having one of the best soundtracks of the 80s by the obligatory Tangerine Dream, who are of course amazing, despite what some of you might think, because Frankie was still part of Tangerine Dream when they did Firestarter. And this to me was Firestarter was originally going to be a John Carpenter movie, I think. And then he was kind of like moved on from the project. But they took on Tangerine Dream, who had a very similar kind of soundtrack approach to John Carpenter, and came up with so what you could do if you're going to do some fan edit stuff, you could take a John Carpenter Lost Themes album and you could match it up to Firestarter, and you could re-edit it a bit and turn it into the John Carpenter film we never got, which oddly enough, considering John Carpenter did the soundtrack for the 2022 remake of Firestarter, is entirely plausible. If you're a fan editor, I've just thrown down a gauntlet. If you aren't, sorry, you'll just have to watch it with an equally good soundtrack by Tangerine Dream. Firestarter is a very interesting film, and it comes up with some of the familiar themes that I've talked about in the other Stephen King kind of stories, the ones about people that are perhaps don't have a huge amount of agency, don't have a huge amount of control and influence and power over their own lives, and kind of like trying to kind of navigate living in a hostile environment that exists around them. George Scott, who is George C. Scott, actually, for contractual purposes, also known as Patton and in The Changeling, and I think it's in Exorcist 3, which is brilliant, by the way. Exorcist 3, fantastic movie. And he does a fantastic role as a single embodiment of governmental evil. The idea of a state trying to gain control of an individual and their powers without knowing what they actually should do with it, and then trying to weaponize that. So in some respects, Firestarter is similar to the Alien films about a government agency or a corporation trying to get control of an independent human or sentient being which really just wants to do whatever it wants to do, and has that precious autonomy of which I'm sure I will talk about at some point, the concept of autonomy. This is the limited edition Blu-ray that is again from, I think, Plan B. It has a fold-out poster. I do wish they would put these rolls up though, because you fold these out and you kind of go, yeah, you know, this is good, but you can see the fold marks, right? How can you get rid of the fold marks on that? You can't. You can't. And it's chock full of extras, as indeed all the best Blu-rays are. So this is, commentaries and extras and stuff like that. And it has postcards that reproduce the lobby cards. So if you're a fan of movies that had lobby cards, for example, they would put, photos in the lobby so that you could look at while you were waiting for your film to start and go, yeah, I want to see that one. I want to see someone that's made a bad job of the cooking, for example. Or you might want to go, well, that doesn't really make a huge amount of sense there. Or perhaps this one, which is, again, two people looking sad and have a bit of the glums because the government is trying to tear them apart so that they can take their daughter, who has the ability to set fire to things with the power of their mind, which, Drew Barrymore does a great job, by the way, of this, and she doesn't even utter the words penis breath, unlike, Stephen King's E.T. So there you go. But Firestarter is a very good film. Very 80s. There's a lot of these come from the 80s. I should say that there have been, King adaptations that have gone all the way through time, but most of them, like a chunk, probably a good third of them, happened in the 80s, and then it got a little quieter. At number 13, Cat's Eye, which, depending upon, your point of view, is good, bad, ugly, or weird. So what I will say about Cat's Eye, and again, this is the UK Blu-ray version of it, is it has too many cameos, and that's where I start to knock some points off for it. Because at the beginning, you've got a fluffy dog that looks just like QJ. You've got Christine that's shown in there. You've got other characters and imagery from the other films, which clearly are there just to make you know, this is a Steve. It's like, yeah, really, you don't need it. But it does have one of the best stories, I think, which is Quitters Incorporated, with James Woods encouraged to give up cigarettes with a shady self-help or operation who do some really unsavoury things in order to persuade him to quit. Very interesting idea. And then there's The Ledge, which is the story of an unscrupulous casino owner who kidnaps, and let me just go, Johnny Norris. Does he even have a name? It doesn't matter. Played by Robert Hayes, formerly of Airplane, to walk on the ledge all around a skyscraper. And it's got some high stakes in it. The last bit, Drew Barrymore is haunted by a troll. Not so great. So obviously the first two, really good. In fact, if you took, let's say, those two plus a couple of the stories from Creepshow, you'd have an amazing anthology, but you don't. Right, number 12, Misery, which, despite me saying earlier you wouldn't get things like Shawshank Redemption and Green Mile, because anybody could write Misery, but only Stephen King actually did. And there's something about Misery which I think is very interesting, in so much as it addresses perhaps the flip side of fame, but does so in a way that isn't immediately obviously bizarre. It isn't really obviously, this is about my experiences with Weird Stalky fans. It's an extrapolation of experiences that you could have with those, but presents them in a way that actually legitimately works as drama. And again, it's a bottle episode. It's two people in a house for the vast majority of the film, one of whom has been kidnapped by the other. And the expectations that fans have from their from the artists and creators that they feel that they have a relationship with. It is a very nuanced version of it. And I think, Kathy Bates won an award for Best Actress. And honestly, she knocks it out of the park, does a great job with it. James Caan is very good. Really rate that. Right, we're into the end game now, the top 11. Carrie, Brian De Palma's first major movie, the first major Stephen King adaptation, and for me it fulfills all the criteria of teenage wish fulfillment. Something, by the way, that also comes up in the Stephen King / Richard Bachman book, Rage, which no longer exists and is no longer published. I'll be coming back to this book later on. But Rage, a high school teenager becomes a gang of one in a terrifying display of rebellion. Carrie does much the same thing. A high school teenager becomes an army of one in a terrifying display of rebellion. And Carrie is, for me, and again, you'll see this in Carrie, you'll see it in Christine, You'll see it in certainly in some of the other ones, is there's a depiction of historic adolescence in a way that very, very few films ever really capture. And I watch a lot of films, as you know, and I had a not amazing childhood and adolescence in so much as my school experience was. Yes, I was bullied like everybody else, and I was bullied because I was there, because I had hair or I didn't have hair, because I had glasses or I didn't have glasses, because I was 5'10" or I wasn't 5'10". It didn't matter what the reason was. The reason was that I was there, and the people that bullied me, and yes, I remember your names, and I think you're still shitty human beings. The people that bullied me were also products of feeling a complete lack of autonomy and a complete lack of influence over their life, and were taking their frustrations out on other people. And they were taking it out on people they perceived to be weaker than them. Carrie, Christine, these are texts which really talk about that. Rage does it as well. The Long Walk has elements of that in there, where people are talking and thinking about, as someone that's young and doesn't have a huge amount of influence, how the world treats you without respect and dignity, because it perceives you not to have power and influence and control over your own life, which is completely normal irrespective of your age, but perhaps more so when somebody is younger. Carrie captures to an extent what it might have been like to have been that age in 1976. The things about like school proms, school discos, the nature of, the divided nature of people. Also kind of covered in Heathers a little bit as well. Is a very realistic portrayal of youth and fitting in and not fitting in dysfunctional home environments. There is an element of the teenage revenge fantasy about it, which is also executed in Rage, and executed is probably the word. But there's also the sense of you'll never do it, which exists in Carrie and exists in Christine as well. That sense that those people have already had their fates predetermined for them by the reality that is around them. And by predetermined, what I mean is, for example, the idea is you want to go off and be in a band. You'll never do that. You want to be an author. That'll never happen to you. You want to escape the town that you grew up in. You'll never get to do that. You want to not work at the local supermarket. That's not for you. The idea that when you're that age, people tell you, who am I? And people tell you, this is who you're going to be for the rest of your life, whether you like it or not. Don't get ideas above your station. Don't get too big for your britches. Your job is to serve at the supermarket, and to do so for the rest of your life. Don't forget, you're here forever, like The Simpsons. And Carrie really captures that air of, that wasn't the path for me. And I mean, when I was growing up, when I was 17, 18, and I was in Birmingham, and I was like trying to find who was I going to be as an adult? What was my career going to be? Where was I going to live? Who was I going to love? What was I going to do? I couldn't have imagined that my life would be here now. If you'd have said you've moved 152 miles away from home, that you've got a career, that you've got you own a home, you have a degree of you have a job, and you've got a family and friends and people that love you, and all that type of stuff. I'm kind of go, that's important. It's really, really important. But again, people put you in a box and tell you never get out of the box. And Carrie is a degree of teenage wish fulfillment. And yes, through the power of telekinesis, Carrie is able to overthrow the people that oppress them in a way that's really quite frightening, quite visceral, very direct. And it's a very good film in that respect. But it is very clearly 50 years old and showing every one of its years, if nothing else, in some of the terrible hairstyles. Right, number 10. So number 10, and this one might be a bit controversial, Doctor Sleep. I think that you shouldn't touch Stanley Kubrick films with a barge pole. You shouldn't do sequels to them, and if you are going to do sequels to them, beware. Doctor Sleep does all the things right that 2010 does wrong. And that sounds bizarre, but it really, really does. There's a fantastic, phenomenal, extended director's cut version of Doctor Sleep on here that makes a lot more sense. Unlike a lot of sequels, it isn't, let's go and revisit the same beats that we had in the previous movie. Let's have the guy wear a suit, do a car stunt, meet a girl, meet a bad guy, stop them from taking over the world by creating their own master race type of stuff, which is, the James Bond formula. Doctor Sleep is not a sequel. It is a continuation of the lives of the characters which are in The Shining. And it goes in different directions because they make different decisions in much the same way as people got really, really annoyed during The Last Jedi because Luke Skywalker wasn't their little lightsaber bitch. Doctor Sleep does the same thing with those characters and goes, no, they've gone in different directions. Their experiences have changed them. They're not the people that you think that they are. And there's some very, very good ideas in there. There's some iconic moments in Doctor Sleep. Doctor Sleep works as a sequel to both the book of The Shining and the film of The Shining. The two are very, very different things. And really kind of, puts it to a different approach. And it's a very it's a very interesting film. It's worth seeing. It's not as good as The Shining. Only one film in the world is better than The Shining. And if you go back to some of my earlier episodes, that film is Dougal and the Blue Cat. But if you haven't, Doctor Sleep can't be as good as The Shining because The Shining is the second best film ever made, in my opinion. Oops, I've just told you what the number one is. Shh, don't tell anyone. But Doctor Sleep is a very, very, very good film. And then we get to number 9, The Running Man. Again, I'm not mentioning the Edgar Wright sequel because 1, it hasn't come out, and 2, I don't know what it's like. But The Running Man, and here is Stephen King writing as Richard Bachman. It follows in the trend of a number of similar kind of things. So, Stephen King at this point, and I said obviously with Rage, with The Long Walk, it's about characters that are backed into situations they've got no control about. They do desperate things. It's a parody of a future that could have been similar to RoboCop, similar to Starship Troopers, similar to a lot of other things. And it's got some fantastic moments in the film. It is very different from the book. The book has an ending that post 9/11 is problematic. And also, the Running Man has, as a book, I understand the motive behind the lead character, Ben Richards, is very different. So in the film, he's framed for a crime he didn't commit, like a one-man Austrian A-team. And in this, he's a man that desperately needs to pay for his daughter's medical care. So there's a difference there. But as a film, it works very, very well as a parody of a future that we could be living in. It features, for example, such amazing game shows as Climbing for Dollars. It features, a world that is plausible, where effectively we have the equivalent of Orwell's 2-Minute Hate, where people are set up to fail and then kind of punished for transgressions and things that they never ever did. Very similar, as I mentioned earlier, the othering and the otherness which you experience in some of the other Stephen King films, where it's about somebody that feels that they no longer belong in the society in which they thought they did, that due to a random grasp or twist of fate, a random quirk, that suddenly they are exiled. And so, Ben Richards becomes the bad guy. He's portrayed in the film to have willingly opened fire on unarmed children and civilians. Women and children there. And he shoots them. And of course, which he doesn't, but the footage is manipulated and doctored to make you think that he does. And then the game is rigged so that he doesn't lose, but somehow he does. It reminds me in some respects of elements of Total Recall, which, by the way, I absolutely love. Maybe I should do a Schwarzenegger ranking at some point. That would be amazing. But it's a fun movie, and you don't often get fun with Stephen King. You don't often get fun. It's a fun movie which also has a distinct point about the nature of entertainment, information, and about how we are all effectively, just great big meat for the grinder, aren't we? Or as Michael Ironside said in Starship Troopers, when he pulls his desk out and reveals that he hasn't got his legs, is that the army made me the man I am today. Right, number 8. And we are getting to the gold here. We absolutely are. Christine. She's a killer. I love this film. I think this is a great movie. Now, it is a massive step down from The Thing, but everything is everything is a massive step down from The Thing, if you think about it. Because Christine is a small story. It's not a big one. The Thing, Prince of Darkness, They Live, The Fog, they all kind of, in the Mouth of Madness, they all tap into this kind of air of the kind of heart of darkness, kind of doom and gloom, end of the world approach. Christine is not that. It is a film about obsession. It's about a film about love. It's about, it's a film which you see as an analogy for first love, that moment when you first fall in love with somebody, and it doesn't matter how ill suited they are, you will fight to the end of the world for that person, for that thing. So watch out, because nothing's going to stop that love ever. And it also has a spellbinding appearance by Keith Gordon, who then later went on to direct films. Keith Gordon didn't appear in many films, but he had a great skill. He totally dominated the screen in Christine. And it's a fantastic film about teenagedom, obsession, and about how that can take over absolutely everything. It makes the cursed object, the image, the car, and it's understated. And in fact, by ditching the ghost story, so in the book, I hate to break it to you, in the book, the cursed kind of driver, so to speak, and that's not a pun for Christine, is the ghost of the former owner, which appears in the backseat and tells Arnie Cunningham what to do. In the film, no such thing. It's just the car that has an inexplicable hold over him, and uses Arnie's sense of not belonging in the world around him and the fact that he's bullied by others to kind of ensnare him into retribution. Because if people see, there's a theory which is, if you treat people like animals, they behave like animals. If you treat people like shit, they fight back. And they might not have ever had that fight in them to start with, but there comes a point where they're prepared to go, no, this far, no further, this is my line. And Christine, as a film, kind of exploits that. Christine looks at that anger and it calls to the character, and the character becomes inseparable from him. And there's some moments where you clearly just go, wow. I mean, actually, it's a really good film. It wasn't the film people were expecting after The Thing, and I think that's why some people didn't like Christine. I think it's a film that has aged magnificently, and I rate it strongly. I think it's very, very good. This limited edition on Indicator, 2 discs with a booklet, definitive edition of the film. Very, very much enjoy it. Right, this will take us to number 7. You might not be expecting this, because number 7 is Maximum Overdrive. This film has no redeeming features whatsoever. It is stupid. It is silly. It is ridiculous. It is sometimes plotted by an idiot. It is a proof that cocaine is one hell of a drug and can impair our judgment. It is also hilariously good fun about an army of killer vehicles that have taken over the world with only mechanical moving parts, no complex objects or machinery, like Arnold said in The Terminator, that have come alive for a period of just 8 days whilst the Earth is in the shadow of a comet. And it's just nonsense. It's fun. It's silly. AC/DC do the soundtrack. Is it good? Absolutely not. Is it fun? 100%. It's just silly, and there's nothing to be wrong with that. So the next one is 5 and 6. So it's 2 films together, but actually it's 3, because it's it. What is it? It's it. Both the 1990 version starring Tim Curry and the later kind of 2010s edition, which is 2017 and 2019. The first thing I will say is this is the one that lots of people think is absolutely amazing. It has some fantastic moments. Tim Curry chews the scenery for all he's worth. Tim Curry is one of the best actors on the planet. He's phenomenal in most things that he's ever been in. I think he's been in Rocky Horror, Clue, Legend, and he's great in this. He does a fantastic job, but it's not quite there. is limited by the fact that it was on television and was restricted, therefore, by a television budget and a television vision. And although it was obviously shot on film in 1.85 widescreen, it's not quite as good as you might necessarily want it to be. The special effects are, by definition, a little bit rushed, a little bit less than special, and that's what drags it down, because it's not convincing. This, with the benefit of hindsight, with the benefit of 26 years between adaptations, this version of it really takes some areas and expands and extrapolates on them enormously. The 2017 version has more time to explore the stories, the parallels. It's more brutal and more open. I think in some of its ideas it's more explicit and more detailed in some other areas. It has more illusions that draws more clearly to politics. So, for example, the fact that it comes back every 27 years and takes the same form. And it's not a coincidence, I don't think, that it came out in 2017, a year where suddenly we were starting to deal with things like moral panics. We were dealing with Trump, Brexit, political illusions, and it could be seen as, for example, a allegory for fascism. Certainly you can very much look at it and see how it can be attractive and alluring, the clown that says nice things to you and drags you in and then destroys you. And you can look at that and go, well, some politicians, snake oil salesmen, promise you something, all they really care about is the vote, and once they've got the vote, they don't care, they drop you. It works on that level, and I mean, in terms of horror, it's very well done. It has some stunning images in there. The moments where there's just that one balloon, the moment of the killing at the beginning of the gay couple. Sorry to spoil it for you, which is pretty clear. The way that it's indiscriminate in terms of who it picks as its victims. It is, the 2017-2019 version is to my tale, perhaps with longer to mature and more time to settle. It's like a fine wine. It's very, very, very good, and I absolutely love it. So there's 4 left now, 4 left, because that's number 5, and it is 1990 is number 6. So what ones do you think it's going to be? Well, I've already told you what number 1 is, but what you don't get is number 4. Number 4, The Dead Zone. This is a classic, undoubtedly so. I watched it recently, absolutely love it to bits. Again, saw it by recording it on ITV late at night, watched it on VHS with the ad breaks. I can still tell you where the ad breaks are. It is a fabulous, classic chiller. Not a horror movie, because a horror movie is designed to make you scared. This is more about the terror of possibility, around what possibilities can be and how terrifying those possibilities can be. Now, I have to spoil it slightly. The main character, whose name Johnny Smith. I mean, that is the most bland, obvious name you can get. Johnny Smith. Literally the everyman, played by Christopher Walken, who again delivers that fantastic line about the ice is gonna break. Does probably a career best performance here, and that is in a fabulous career, by the way, where when he physically makes contact with people, he's able to see the worst moments of their lives, and he shakes the hand of a man standing for senator. That senator is, and let me just quickly guess, Greg Stilson, played by Martin Sheen, and it's a warning about politics. I remember the day after Trump was elected, I posted up the Greg Stilson campaign badge, which, if I remember correctly, is still on the inside of the DVD there, Stilson for senator. And I went, the missiles are flying, hallelujah. It is a terrifying story about what could be, and about how public perception and people's real nature. And it's sad, and it's powerful, and it has a beautifully tragic subplot about the life that we could have lived, the life that could have happened had he not had his accident and been in a coma, about what's to happen when you start your life again, how you cope with all of that. Sensitively directed by Cronenberg. I would go so far as to say this is probably my favourite Cronenberg film, which, if I was to do the Cronenberg ranking, would totally fuck it up, because I've just told you my number 1 for that. But it is one of my favourite films. I love it to bits. I think it's a great movie. It's got a lot to say about human nature and human experience. Number 3, and I can't show you the DVD because it hasn't come out yet, is The Long Walk. And here is the Bachman books. So The Long Walk came out about a month ago. Mark Hamill is in it. It is a story about, effectively, again, another literal killer game show like The Running Man, about people that don't have agency or control, that are granted their every wish if they win, but if they lose, they die. And it is, not too far away. I've actually, what it reminds me of is the 1990s, maybe late early 2000s TV show called Touch the Truck. Now, if you don't remember Touch the Truck, you are so lucky. But I watched it. Touch the Truck was where, led by Dale Winton, you had to just keep touching the truck until the last person to touch the truck won the truck. And you couldn't. You had to stand and touch the truck for as long as it could be. And, people were like literally shitting themselves on television to win the truck. And The Long Walk is basically touch the truck, but with machine guns and highways. A story about human endurance, a story about human fractionalism, the way that we're fragmented as individuals and we don't communicate with others. We don't work for the good of everybody else because we can't communicate with everybody else. It's about a single, determined, philosophical point of view. And you think, well, just a bunch of kids walking at 3 miles an hour is not going to be like, that big a deal. Well, it is, because you end up exploring people that are absolutely desperate and will go through anything. And it's a metaphor, isn't it? It's like a metaphor. When it's gone, like the middle of little. But it's a metaphor for when you are absolutely out of options and you only have one thing you've got to do, and you've got to execute the task that's ahead of you. Mark Hamill is great in this. I think he should get an Oscar. The characters are well drawn. There's a couple of moments of genuine revulsion. I think there's the first death in it is very, very, very graphic. But after that, it just becomes, just it's a thing, innit? It's a person dying. It's no big deal. And then suddenly by the time you get to like 40-something people dying, it just becomes, well, the day that I came to your village was the worst day of your life, but for me it was a Tuesday. And it's a very, very good film. I really enjoy it. It has some fantastic moments. It has a lot to say about human nature, determination and teamwork. But I can't show you the Blu-ray because the film has only been out for about a month. But it's very, very good. So we're into the last two. What are the last two going to be? Well, if I show you number 2, you're going to know what number 1 is, because I've already told you what number 1 is. But number 2, and this is very underrated, I think, directed by Frank Darabont. It is The Mist. This is one of the best horror movies of all time. Again, it follows the concept of the bottle episode. People trapped in an environment, different personalities working against and towards each other as they try to survive a situation outside of their control and their comprehension. And again, the tension that exists in this, like a lot of stories about stasis, crisis and resolution. The stasis is the opening few minutes. And by the way, the lead character in this is clearly based upon the now sadly departed Drew Struzan, who illustrated and painted a huge number of DVD covers, movie posters and soundtrack albums, which if you liked anything in the 80s that was related to movies, you will remember. But it's also about just goes to the shops one day, a mist comes in, and all fucking hell breaks loose, to quote the great Arnold in Commando. There are 2 versions of this film. There is the colour version, which is on the single Blu-ray. There is the black and white edition, the noir version, which is on the second Blu-ray. Or you can just turn the colour down on your TV if you're feeling particularly cheap. But it is a film about, again, human endurance, human desperation, human imagination, about how people intersect and interact with each other. And it has an ending that, I'm not going to spoil it, but Stephen King says is even better than his book. And that's very high praise from him. It is one of the bleakest endings I've ever seen to a film. It is a genuinely great horror movie. So number 1, this shouldn't be a surprise, because number 1 is the second best film of all time after Dougal and the Blue Cat. It is The Shining, Stanley Kubrick's film from 1980. This film has a lot of meaning to me. It's been a favourite since I first saw it. Again, I was about 13, 14 when it was on British television. It is the best divorce film of all time. It's like Kramer versus Kramer with ghosts. It is a film about law, it's about commitments, it's about legality, it's about the nature of reality, it's about, is nature real? Is what we're perceiving accurate and fair? Are we seeing the things that everybody else is seeing, or are we living in an alternate version of reality where two people can look at the same events at the same point of time, and then two people can draw completely different results from that? It's about perception, it's about commitment. And again, it's about, a bottle episode. It's about people in a confined space dealing with an unexpected set of circumstances, trying desperately to survive. I have done a whole episode about The Shining way back in the midst of lockdown, where I can't remember what I said. It was about number 118 or so when I was talking about Stanley Kubrick films. And it's just a great film that I love dearly, and I have all the time in the world for it. So that is my number one, my very favourite Stephen King film. And as I said before, my second favourite film of all time after Dougal and the Blue Cat. Yeah, that's a hill I'm going to die on. So that is, for Halloween, that is my Stephen King movies adaptations ranked, going from 20 to 1. Now, I haven't mentioned all of them because there are approximately 48 Stephen King movies. Some of them, such as Silver Bullet, are absolutely atrocious. Some of them, absolutely not. But there still aren't as many as the Amityville Horror. And I should point out, by the way, the Amityville Horror has something like 58 separate movies, because the reason the Amityville Horror has 58 separate movies is because other horror franchises such as Friday the 13th can be trademarked. The name of a town or location cannot be trademarked, and that is why there is the Amityville Curse, the Amityville Ghost, the Amityville Car, the Amityville Hammer, the Amityville Bullshit, and a whole bunch of other films that have nothing to do with anything to do with Amityville. Whereas obviously, by the time you get to Friday the 13th, part 13, Freddy versus Jason have a fight in space. I know that's not its real title. You are in the law of diminishing returns. Here we are with perhaps a slightly different set. It's also why I'm wary of horror movie sequels unless they're called Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. But nonetheless, this is my top 20 Stephen King movies. And if you haven't seen some of these, hopefully I've whetted your appetites. And if you have seen them, hopefully I've made you want to go back and watch them again. And in the meantime, take care of yourselves and each other. Stay beautiful, beautiful ones. And I will see you soon. Be excellent to each other. Good night.